Okay, we're going to start in three, two. All right, it's time to talk with our featured guest, Michael Dinsio. Michael, how's it going?
What's up, Michael? This is a Michael and Michael show
I
today.
know. I think last time I told you, I was like, it's weird saying your own name, right? Like, hey,
Yeah,
Michael,
yeah, yeah.
Do you go by Mike?
Let's go Mike today, because then I could say Michael and you could say Mike. It's perfect.
Okay, cool. Mike is pretty easy. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about your past, your present. How'd you get to where you are today?
Yeah, no, that's a complicated answer. I bet you it is for all your interviewers, but if I condensed it down, ex banker, fell in love with the consulting process as a banker, got into consulting, founded Next Level Consultants, and we help doctors get into ownership and thrive after. I've been doing this for about a little over a decade. I think I have at least 400
Wow.
transactions and startups under my belt, and we're a full service consulting firm now that not only helps get into ownership but also gives support after. So yeah, just love being in the industry and giving back as much as we can.
I like that, man. So you were an ex-bank. How long were you a banker for?
6 years, 6 long years, but it was good. It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where
six
were
years.
you? If you don't mind me asking, could I ask, like, what was the bank you were banking at?
Yes, Bank of America. It was Bank of America.
Okay.
No, they were great. I, I can't. Like without that background, I wouldn't
Mhm.
be where I'm at today. I met so many people in the industry. I got to touch so many deals and interview thousands of dentists. Looked at hundreds of tax returns, and just really, it really gave me the view of dentistry. But it wasn't until I got into consulting that I felt like I really know dentistry at the ground level. I'll use your word, ground.
Yeah.
Hashtag ground. Um, as a banker, you stay pretty high level, and I thought I knew everything about dentistry, and then I got into it as a consultant. I'm like, oh my god, I didn't know anything about dentistry. So the two worlds collided: consulting and banking, numbers focused and very high level, strategy, business, like kind of high level, and then now as a consultant, like we're in the business of making changes on a small increment, in small ways, but added up can make major changes and have a huge impact on dental practices. So, anyways, it's kind of cool that those two worlds collided for me.
Yeah. What, so you work specifically on the as a banker for like providing loans for dentists or no, just like
Yeah.
practice. Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. Bank of America and others have divisions that are specialized in dental,
Hmm.
and frankly, anybody that's not working with a dental like a department within these big banks that focus on dental, you're probably not serving yourself as well as you could. And so they do have those specialties in those divisions, and literally, I remember the training course at B of A, and we were learning endo and perio and pedo. And if your bank doesn't know the difference between ortho and GP, and you know,
Yeah.
you're or an endo versus a perio, you need to move on to someone else. So yeah, you'd be surprised.
Wow, man. So then what were some things where it was like, now we're not going to give you this loan to compare to like, yeah, we will. Yeah, this is a slam dunk, easy.
Um, yeah. So, gosh, I mean, I run into this in my business now as a buyer's rep or startup is, I would say experience, production, like the production history,
Mhm.
cash on hand. Oddly enough, character. The character of the borrower comes up
Yeah.
quite a bit. Credit, of course. I'm seeing a lot of C words. They we used to call it the five C's: character, credit, cash, credit. I don't know. I forget all the five C's, but a lot of C's in there.
Gotcha. Is there like a specific I mean, have terms changed since back then to now? Like if we were like, oh, Bank of America, like is there a specific cash that they look in for? What's the credit limit that, oh my gosh, it's too low just because of a couple points?
Yeah. I would say the structure of the actual deals haven't changed much. Like the payment schedule, and how the money's been being dispersed, like for startups, like the graduated payments, little nuances, but for the most part, the amount of money lent for a startup has gone up in the last decade. Um, for the most part, for acquisitions, it's pretty the same. I mean, I think it's interesting because Bank of America is the largest lender in the country, and at least it was.
Mhm.
And some people have left and started other groups, and it's always got that B of A influence a little bit.
Yeah.
So, ironically, the underwriting, anybody that understands dental um, has kind of that same structure as far as underwriting goes. But yeah, not much change, to be honest with you. Mm-mm.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good. So then I know you kind of alluded to it right now. You said acquisitions, and I know next level consultants, you guys kind of help out with a lot of parts in the practice, right? But what would you say what's Mike's area of expertise?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, today I would consider us a full service consulting firm.
Mhm.
We've got all kinds of areas where we could help, but my focus inside our firm is really helping doctors get into ownership. We kind of alluded to that. I do a lot of startups and a lot of acquisition representation, so buyer representation. So young docs, sometimes not young, but docs looking to get into ownership the right way, taking the right processes through that, whether it's buying or starting. I can help them do both, but that's my specialty. I obviously love the business part of dentistry. I've got an MBA, and I just really love the strategy and the different nuances of each dental business. You've got Medicaid, you've got super high end, like bougie, high touch dental practices, and everything in between. And so I think both are great. So I fell in love with the business dentistry, and that's my kind of piece of the firm. We've got other coaches that focus on clinical and front office, but my side is getting docs into ownership, and then making sure they're great business owners after they got the keys.
Yeah. I'm gonna kind of ask you a total curveball question here, like that. While you were talking, it made me think of it because one of the practices I used to work at, they were in like I wouldn't say it was like a Beverly Hills type of location, like demographics. It was more like a not Beverly Hills, right? So, but they wanted to be boutique. They're like, I want to be the cream of the crop, like the
Yeah.
best, where I just want the best patients. But it was like nonstop Medicaid, like all the time, Medicare, right? And as soon as they started accepting it, like it was forget it. It was like 80% of the practice, or I don't know, I just do that number out, but it was like a huge number of percent of the practice. Could it ever change to like, okay, now you know what? I want to be boutique, but it's like, hey, your environment and your community is not, no, it can't. Or could it? Could it happen?
Yeah, so when I'm working with a startup, I think this is going to sound super cliche, so I hope it doesn't. But it's so true. Vision. If you don't have an idea of what you're doing and what you want to do, um, all the wheels fall off the train. But to what you're saying, like if someone's vision is X and the market demands something differently, um, the preparation before you go into a startup, for example, you have to do your research. You have to know what an area is looking for, and that's why we do demographic reports and we do business plans, and we try to do as much prep work as possible before we start that startup journey. Because if you're just kind of like forcing a vision onto some area that's not going to really accept it, you're going to have a hard time. Um, I actually had someone do the opposite. They went all Medicaid, or took all PPOs, all Medicaid, super busy, not profitable, almost defaulted. It wasn't a next level client, but it was a B of A client back in the day. And then he decided after COVID, he was just going to go all fee for service, implants, all on fours, just all cosmetic stuff. And he turned it around. So yeah, I think the more preparation that goes into going into ownership, whether it's a start up or acquisition, know what you're looking to buy, know what the demographics are in the marketplace, know all of that, because look, it's not you can't just put up a sign anymore that says dentist and be successful. You actually have to be good at business.
Hmm.
And if you don't like business, or if you act like none of these other factors matter, you're going to get stung really, really quickly. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. So then it can, you can kind of change it depending on the demographic, or you can't.
Yeah, I think you can. It's
Yeah.
going to be a hard lesson. It's going to be super stressful.
Yeah.
Um, I guess the point though is you shouldn't have to if you've done your homework and you've done your prep work and you do your demographic reports. But yeah, I mean, I think businesses have to adapt every single day. I have to adapt, like how I do what I do. And Michael, you have to adapt, I'm sure, every day and what you have to do. And so
Mhm.
part of being a great business person is realizing what's happening, tracking what you're doing, seeing what's successful, and adapting. So, can you? Absolutely. People get off of insurances all the time. I always say, said it today, this morning when I was talking to someone that was thinking about doing a startup. I said, "Well, who's more profitable, Walmart or Nordstrom?" And to me, it's an obvious answer, and to you, it might be too. But some of my prospects have a hard time with that. And
Mhm.
the truth of the matter is, Walmart's top five, sometimes one, of profitability. They're up there with Exxon Mobil, and it's a big, big, big company. And then Nordstrom's probably, I don't know this, but probably in the hundreds, number 100 on the Fortune 500. It doesn't mean Nordstrom's wrong. It doesn't mean that Walmart's right. It just means it's just a different business, and you just got to know what business you're trying to do and who your target market is, and you have to adapt. So I think that all matters as you're going into business for sure.
Yeah. I like that. Okay. Because I mentioned that because I feel like, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot. I mean, just with our businesses, anybody's business, like vision can change. You know what I mean? Like as we get older, we're like, oh my gosh, I thought I wanted this. But so in that case, is it like, should we look to open up another practice once the vision changes? Like we
Mhm.
have this one going already. Great. It's going to be too much work to drop everything, fee for service and everything. Let's just start up another practice and look for an acquisition or startup, you know?
I love that question because I can tie it back to my podcast. It's called
Mhm.
Startup Uncensored. My first episode called it's like episode 1, Vision. And we interviewed Dr. Joanna Valentine. And your question is perfect because she bought a practice, her very first practice, and it was a solid practice. It made great money, very busy, collected all fees, classic bread and butter practice. But when they hired me, they wanted to do a startup downtown Seattle. This practice that she had bought was kind of north end, different blue collar area.
Mhm.
And they totally had a vision change. And it was their cash cow that they had bought, but the practice was run down, equipment's run down, whatever. They have this vision for downtown Seattle of all Sorona, and it's all white and beautiful, and it's going to be multi specialists. And
Yeah.
they really executed that new vision, and they're killing it in Seattle. And so it reminds me, that's why we had that vision episode, because they had a vision switch. And absolutely, can you do that? I think so. Over the years, I had a bunch of clients say, "Hey, we're going to have our Medicaid practice over here, but we're going to have our other practice over there." And
Mhm.
I, dentistry takes all forms. Patients need help. The good business owners understand that the business of Medicaid and that type of dentistry, you have to do it this way, and you have to do this boutique practice this way, but different models, right? If you did accelerated hygiene on a boutique practice, that might not work.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's true.
So
So it just depends on like yeah, that's good because I feel like, yeah, a lot of the times, just like, people change, things can change. And we kind of get confused if it's like, should we start up something new? Should we just find something, you know what I mean? Or try and compartmentalize our own practice. Um, and I think that's I don't know. I think you could recompartmentalize it, but it's up to you. You know what I mean? Everybody's
yeah,
different.
I mean, business is business. Sell it, make some money, keep it, keep the cash flow going. It just all has to make sense, and it's I think the big thing with doctors is they grind every day. What I realized as a consultant is, uh, in a dental practice, you all live in 15-minute increments. Like if
Mm.
you don't check somebody in like on the hour, it could set you back behind on the next one, or you have to rush the cleaning the last 30, few minutes just to whatever, right? It's just very granular, and you guys get lost in that. And I would too. Like you walk in and it's bam, it's like systems, 15-minute increments, boom, 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 right? Hundreds of patients, what maybe in a day sometimes in these really quick, big businesses. But if you don't back up and look at what you're doing and track things that you're trying to accomplish and look back at your vision, make the tweaks that you need to meet, you know what I mean? Like you can quickly wake up and hate what you're doing.
Hmm.
So absolutely, can you change? You just have to be intentional about what you're doing, and not get stuck in the weeds. Everybody has to work on their business just as much as they work in their business. Sure, you've heard
Yeah.
that before.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. I feel like I think that it changes because a lot, I mean, maybe you've experienced this too. Like we kind of start slow with fear. You know what I mean? Like we're like, okay, we should just, how many ops do you want? Oh, let's just kind of get like, three plumbed and then, separate two. We want that big off, you know what I mean? And then lo and behold, like in a year, you're like, oh my gosh, we're bursting out of this. You know what I mean? We need to open up a new location because of this. Should that always be kept in mind? Or, I mean, I'm pretty sure you have also seen those practices where like it's year 5 and we are struggling. Like, what is happening here? And so then good thing they didn't, you know what I mean? Get like a 10 op type of practice that was down the road or whatever, right? How do we make better decisions at the beginning process with this?
I love that question because I find that the second scenario is the more common one.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has hopes and dreams to have multi practice, multi specialty, grandiose. I'm going to combat DSO head to head. Let's go. Everybody does. The reality is it is baby steps. And I would, Michael, wouldn't you rather have first world problems versus third world problems?
Oh, yeah. This
Yeah.
sounds, yeah.
First world problems is I am so dang busy and I'm making so much money. What do I do with it?
Yeah.
Versus I'm busy, but I'm not making any money. Why? Higher
Mm-hmm.
overhead, too many employees, mixed up vision, not sure if they should drop insurance, too many insurances. I mean, I'm not managing this right. Right. And so I say baby steps, but I would say most of my docs talk to me about, well, I don't want to max out. And I would challenge you to, sure, I hope that's a problem. But as a practice consultant and a startup coach and buyer rep coach, lean and mean is okay. Working 3 days and crushing your days actually works out better than opening up 5 days and having holes throughout your schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You've got higher wages, and so I think for the most part, people get really wrapped up into let's just go at it and just assume that they're going to get tons of new patients, and that's your department. But you know, if you had 25 new patients a month and you only worked 3 days a week, and your team's only coming in 3.5, 4 days a week, you're going to be pretty profitable, assuming that your rent isn't so out of control too. The bigger the space, the more rent. So I'm not saying do too small. I'm not saying do a 3 op practice as a startup, but I'm also not saying let's go 8 ops right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gotcha. So I think that's where like it's really essential to, I mean, there's many ways, but like that's where it's essential, I think, to like look for someone who knows more. You know what I mean? Like a consultant, like what you guys do, or find it somewhere, a friend, a mentor, something, right? To kind of guide you through that process. Let me ask you something. Do you guys work with more acquisitions or startups? People who like want to do it from the ground up?
It's cyclical. Like, and I'm looking at my board here in 2020, which I know pandemic, we worked with more acquisitions. I think
Mm-hmm.
there was that pent up energy. And then I think a lot of people put their practices up for sale because they were just sick of being in the
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Uh, more acquisitions that year. This year is trending way more startups. Um, I think it's because of the lack of inventory out there right now, and so people are just sick of waiting for that unicorn practice. Hell, it's not
Hmm.
even unicorn practice anymore. It's just, a decent practice, and so they decide to take their destiny into their hands. I always say, pick a date. Like, I know that you would prefer an acquisition, but pick a date. By what date are you going to take things into your own hands? Or are you just going to wait years and years and years to find that perfect practice to buy? And so but that can be aggravating too. So pick a date, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. And if you can't find anything inside that 6 month, make a commitment to yourself to get into ownership by, the next year or something like that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah,
Yeah.
right in this moment, more startups for sure.
Yeah. That's good. I remember speaking with I believe it was Brian Hanks, but maybe one of the listeners, if you guys can correct me if I'm wrong or anything like that. But in that episode, he kind of mentioned like if you can't find an acquisition, that means you're not looking hard enough or you didn't take as much time. But then I speak with a lot of people who did a startup and they're like, I just couldn't find the practice that I wanted to for the terms that I wanted. And I looked and looked, and some people look for years. Some people, they're like, okay, I looked for like 2 months, right? And
Mhm.
then they decided to do their own startup. So I guess what would be a good reason to do a startup, and what would be a bad reason to do a startup versus an acquisition?
That's a great question. I think Brian's right, by the way. Brian knows his stuff. Respect him as a competitor in the market. I think most people don't put the time in that they need to find a practice. He's right. But it is still hard. I mean, letter dropping and networking with the C players, quote unquote, in your marketplace, not the A players. Like, everybody knows the A players, but networking with the C players could find a practice. Going to societies, going ground going ground marketing on that effort, right?
Yeah.
Is a great way of finding a practice. But even still, finding the right practice that fits you, every practitioner needs to really look at the fit in an acquisition. And I'm not blowing anybody's mind by saying that, but like, go next level, no pun intended, on that process. I'm not saying be so finicky on the practice that you pass up on all of them, but the fit does matter. And there are naturally born entrepreneurs that should do a startup. I'm convinced of it. I help both.
Hmm.
Um, I don't have a bias for either. There are folks that are built for a startup and will do better as a startup, and there are folks that are 100% not built for a startup and should buy. And so yeah, I think you need to really check yourself, and you got to look at your financial situation personally, your support at home. You got to look at your ability to do dentistry. You got to look at that, because everybody's different in skill sets.
Hmm.
You got to look at your market. And all of these things should help you find the right path. But I will go on record to say that I would rather you buy than start in the perfect scenario. There's no such thing as perfect,
Hmm.
but I would rather you buy. My second option would be obviously a startup, but there's a third option that people don't talk about. And that third option is buying a buying a practice that's not making it. I would like buying a startup practice, if that makes sense. The underperforming practices. Why on earth would you buy somebody else's headache? Why is it not working? If
Hmm.
you're going to buy that practice, you're not getting cash flow. So why not do a startup? Because you're going to get a better lease. You're going to be able to pick your team. You're going to be able to start marketing the patients that you want to attract. When you're buying a very small practice, it could work sometimes, and I've helped people do it. But I'm just saying, if I had a priority of preference, it would be buying a practice that makes at least 250. Next would be startup. And then the last would be buying that flipper that a lot of people go after just because of that price tag. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think we would talk for hours about the pros and cons of an acquisition for a startup. And I'm convinced that they're the same amount of stress. It's just a different type of stress.
Yeah.
An acquisition stress is maintaining and making sure that that practice does not fall if anything grows, right? Startup is getting cash flow, but um, there's a lot of benefits to startups too. So it's kind of a slower start. It's less stressful, but you're sitting there worrying about when your next patient's going to walk through the door. So it's just totally different stressors.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that, about for pros and cons for acquisitions. But really quick, I want to know, you mentioned uh, some people are naturally born entrepreneurs who will do a startup, who will be fantastic. What are the characteristics of that? Like how can you tell like, oh, this person is going to be fantastic and then this person's going to suck? How can we tell?
Someone, someone that can talk to people. If I could break it down super simple, if you can hold a conversation with somebody and influence them, the influencers in the room, you know who you are. Um, those folks will naturally get people's attention when, whether it's somebody in the chair, whether it's you selling them, and you talk about this a lot, Michael, is you try to get them into your practice. Lyft driver from the airport, hey, you should come into my practice. Like someone that's not afraid of that.
Mm-hmm.
That person, their startup will be as good as any acquisition that I could think of in 2 years because they just have that natural, let's just say the gift of the gab.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the gift of the bad could be a bad thing, but I'm saying someone that could actually influence.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, somebody that's not afraid of numbers, that is interested in business. They might not know all the metrics and all the things, the KPIs and whatnot, but someone that's interested in looking at money and managing money and is a saver, not a spender. Like I would say those types of characteristics are great for startups. Also, someone that can make decisive decisions easy. Like they're not just going to stew on things way too long and opportunities pass them by. I'm not saying someone that's quick action is going to be crazy, but you know who you are, folks. Like if you're just getting really lost in the weeds on every single decision made.
Mm-hmm.
I had someone ask me the other day, um, "Hey, should I give this person a $1 raise?" And that's part of my job for sure. I'm a consultant, but that doesn't change anything in your grand scheme of things. If they deserve it, they deserve it. Great. It's more about what you're going to get back for that $1, right? I don't want to get lost in practice management tips, but my point is if you're getting stuck on that decision for too long, you're going to struggle on a startup because it's a lot
Yeah.
of decisions.
I like that. I like that. Especially the gift of what you said, the gift of gab, or like being able to talk to people. Like, man, I can't tell you how much. And me, like I teach about ground marketing. And I know, like, I don't really believe in like, oh, I'm an introvert, extrovert, things like that. I mean, like sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not, right? So I can be anything. But like, I'm more of the introvert type of person. I'm more of like, I don't really want to go on and talk to people, but you got to turn it on, man. Like it's your business, it's your job. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. So you have to know when to turn it on. But at the same time, I also like what you said about numbers and not being boggled down too little in the details of things that can hold you back. Imagine spending forever, be like, I just can't get the right design for my logo. I don't know. It's been
Yes.
7 months. You know, it's eh, what is that really going to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
So,
I 100%. It's a mentality too. Like I will not fail.
mhm,
Whatever you put in front of me, I got this. That's a startup.
mhm.
I've gone through thousands of interviews in Starbucks,
Yeah,
with doctors looking to get into ownership, whether B of A or today as a consultant. And you either got it or you don't. And I'm not saying you. It doesn't have to be extreme like that. It's just. And by the way, those people could be great acquisition people as well, for sure. It's
Mhm.
just, I I don't know if it goes the other way. The person that is definitely an acquisition person maybe should never do a startup. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
that person that we just described for a startup, they could go over to an acquisition and crush, no problem. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that person that like couldn't do a startup, um, should definitely do an acquisition or don't get into ownership. They should just
Yeah.
stay as associates. Do you know what I'm saying?
So then what are the characteristics or traits that you've seen for an acquisition? Because I've talked to doctors, Mike, where they're like, I can't be, I gotta be my own boss. I gotta be my own boss. But then I've talked to some who are like, oh, I just want to go back to getting that paycheck. And then that's it. I just want to go home, clock out, and be like, hey kids, hey everybody, let's go out for dinner, right? And stuff like that, and not
Yeah,
have to worry about it.
yeah.
And then obviously we both talk to people who are like, I live and breathe this. This is all I want to do is numbers. And so we're like, okay. But to
Mhm.
you, what are the characteristics of someone who is perfect for an acquisition?
Yeah, so someone that's a team player, maybe doesn't want to come up with everything, but is good with a plug and play, um, can lead by example, um, is someone that even has experience, maybe even more experience as an associate, because when you take on a business, the more experience you have as an associate helps you because you're taking over somebody else's business and you need to identify if something's working or not. And if it's
Mm-hmm.
not working, you need to have the experience to say, no, 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 that's not working, team. We're doing it this way. But if you don't have that experience, the team will run all over you. They don't want to change. They've been doing this for years. And so I see that a lot is folks that aren't ready for ownership and they get ran over by their team and they're afraid of losing them. They're afraid of making changes. And so they just kind of go with it. I'll be your dentist. I know I own it and I know I pay you.
Yeah.
But, can we maybe do an hour and a half for a new patient exam instead of 2 hours, please? Maybe, kind of, sort of. What do you think?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Versus, hey, you guys do 2 hours. I want to change it up. Here's why I think it works better. This is what it looks like. What questions do you have? Let's try it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
And
like that.
and they have that experience to say that that works.
Yeah. I like
You
that,
know,
man.
as a startup, you got 20 new patients in your first month. You could take 3-hour exams if you want.
Mhm. Yeah.
Do you
You
see what
could
I
say,
mean? Like it's a different stressor.
yeah, no, I 100%. I feel like this is almost like one of those like personality tests where it's like, what's your personality type, acquisition or startup? But I like it. So then let's dive into the acquisition side of everything. What are like the pros and cons for acquisitions? And I'll start it off by like saying what I hear a lot of is, oh my gosh, the team. Like, I'm going to lose half the team. Like, let's just say, for example, like I got an acquisition. The office manager has been here for 50 years. She's like, oh, Michael, I got it. What you're saying is cute. You think it works in theory, but it's not going to work here. Don't worry about it. She's technically, you know what I mean? So you're like, oh, I have to deal with that. Some people are leaving. So what are the pros and cons?
You just described a con, in my opinion, but it could also be
Mhm.
considered as a pro because again, someone that wants to plug and play, they're happy to give it to office manager of 50 years. And I just want to do dentistry and make a little bit more than I did as an associate. So,
Mhm.
okay, so the pros of an acquisition, the top three, if I'm shooting from the hip here, cash flow is the first one, cash flow is the second one.
Uh-huh.
And the third one really is systems and teams already set up.
Okay.
Plug and play mentality again. I mean, sure, you want to make some changes here and there, but really it's about winning the patients over clinically and winning the team over clinically. And that's really your job the first 6 months, 12 months of an acquisition. So cash flow, having structure and team is definitely the pros of an acquisition. Um, The cons,
Hmm.
things you can't change things. I mean, you can, but you got to do it in bite-sized pieces, and it's got to be methodical, and you got to get their buy-in. We've specialized in acquisition for a while now, where we get retained post ownership. So we've been personally, like as coaches, we've been literally thrown into the fire of like some changes that the owners want to make, and the team is really pushing back. So not an easy thing to do. And usually the team wins over the consultant, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you got to be
I've seen it.
patient. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, hey, 1.5, I would just keep saying the same scenario, 1.5 hours for new patient. No, we do 2 hours. Consultants like, yeah, the other 50 other clients we have do 1.5. So, and here's how that could work. And what do you guys think? And, consultants some consultants come in and just blunt instruments, but good consultants, in my opinion, get the team's buy-in, and you almost want them to come up with their own ideas about it. Hey,
Hmm.
if we were going to do an hour and a half, what would that look like? And what are the challenges? And let's work through this as a team.
Yeah.
Because once they embrace it, then they're going to embrace it versus a consultant coming in and telling you what to do. But I'm getting sidetracked. So
Hmm.
change is the hard part of an acquisition. You also have you're also getting a lease that you didn't get to pick, the area you didn't really get to pick. Um, Sometimes the equipment technology is not as great.
Hmm.
Sometimes you're inheriting the patient pool that you didn't really think you were going to get.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the downside. Startups, the pros of startups are simple. It's your creation. Literally, what's your vision? Let's create it. Um, what kind of team members do you want? Let's handpick them. And we're in a weird time where we have a shortage of team, but I don't have most of my startups don't have a hard time finding people. Hygienists for sure. But a
Yeah.
startup doesn't really need a hygienist. You shouldn't really do a hygienist day one. So you can find front office people, you can find dental assistants, so you can train dental assistants. So you get to really pick your team. You get to pick the location. You negotiate a phenomenal lease. You get to control your own destiny. Brand new equipment, all great technology. You get to solicit the patients you want, right?
Hmm.
Because Michael, you come into my practice and make a great impression on you. You're going to go tell your friends who are very much like you because they're your friends.
Hmm.
Now all of a sudden you're getting the same people as your patients. Acquisitions, you just better put a smile on and win everybody over, whether you like them or not.
Yeah.
Downsides of startup, cash flow, number one and two. The
Hmm.
downsides, right? Um, and that I guess it's cash flow. The three
Yeah.
cash flow. But the crazy thing about startups is banks always talk about default rates, right? And I was just telling someone this morning that would you be surprised that the success rate of an acquisition and a startup are pretty much the same? They're within 1%.
Mm.
Now that's surprising to me. Now I can dig into that a little bit more. So that's like the headliner.
Hmm. Yeah.
Acquisitions and startups, they're the same. Well, they're not. Per the banks, give or take a percent off. Okay, so like if you're 99% successful in acquisitions, okay, so you're 98% successful in startups. I mean, come on. We're talking about less than a percent difference in default rates. So that's the headliner. That's what you guys should all know. The risks to me are the same. Um,
Hmm.
but if I was going to dig into that a little bit more, default rates versus success are two different things. You could be making your bills and dying,
Yeah.
or you could be making good money. So success and default rates aren't really the same, I know. But just in general, if we're talking about default rates, it's really less than 1% difference. So,
Wow. Okay. That's different. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was like that close to each other. And but yeah, I do. I have heard. I mean, obviously, as we're talking, we do hear a little bit more cons from acquisitions. I want to say, right? Like as
Hmm.
far as you can't change things fast. Your lease in your area you can't change. You didn't pick the equipment. Your patient pool you didn't, and like you can lose a lot more, right? In the sense of or actually you can lose both in the same, but like you can lose like, oh man, the patients can hate you, right? They're like, oh, I didn't want to switch a doctor. I'm just gonna go to my cousin's doctor, right? Or whatever. And then the team can be like, oh, I'm gonna leave here soon. You want to go to this, right? And then the whole team can leave you, right? With an acquisition. But you do have that cash flow, like you said. Um, I've also heard this, Mike, and maybe you've witnessed this is I'm going into an acquisition. I like the numbers. There's some things I don't like. I can live with. I get in and I feel like I've been duped. Like the numbers don't add up. What were they thinking? Was my financial advisor insanely wrong? Like I don't really have as many patients as they said they did in the terminal or in the terms, right? In the agreement. What happened there?
Hmm. Well, that's a loaded question, dude. It's so loaded. But I guess what I would say, if we're talking about just money and what the expectation was,
Mhm.
maybe the doctor didn't realize that all of the projections were before the loan and taxes.
Mm.
Also, so that's number one.
Mhm.
Because the practice brokers put these really beautiful prospectuses together. I look at them all the time, and it tells you what the income would be. But I think if a CPA or myself doesn't explain it, which is why I love the work that Brian Hanks and I do in this market, is because we try to really show the doc how much money they're actually going to make. And I went through value evaluation program. Like I'm technically trained on valuation. And when you look at valuation, you're adding things back like dues and subscriptions and insurance, medical insurance, and anything that would benefit the owner that's considered an expense. I'm really getting deep here, guys.
Mhm.
Sorry. But like these expenses, you're adding those back as a benefit, but the reality is that's not actually real money. You're going to have dues and subscriptions. You're going to have insurance. So valuators or practice brokers put it in terms of like technical valuation of what EBITDA is or true profit is. The reality is you want to have like that real conversation with your financial advisor, or someone like me or a CPA, and saying, okay, yeah. The IRS has all these tricks and blah blah blah. But what
Mhm.
am I actually going to make? Right? And there is a difference. There's a difference. And then you got to factor in the loan, and then you have to factor in, of course, your taxes, and you got to make sure that it all makes sense. And that's why, remember, I said that third option is not a good one,
Mhm.
because on paper it might say you're making 150, but after the loan and after the taxes and after you add put the dues and subscriptions back in, you're making like $60,000, and you could have did way better as an associate. So
Yeah.
you do really got to look in the numbers at a Uncle Sam level, and you got to look at it in the real world level.
Yeah. So that's yeah, that's something I didn't know. You know what I mean? Like where you're adding all that together. And it's kind of something hard to because here's the thing, the seller wants to sell, right? They're like, I just want to sell it. Like let's just do oh my gosh, Mike, I can't tell you. There was this one practice. I don't even know if I'll get in trouble for it, but like I was working for a practice one time here in California who she wanted to sell so bad. She's like, just give me anybody and as many new patients as you can. Let's just, we were bringing in 80, we were bringing in a ton. Did any of them stay? Probably like one or two, right? But on paper, it looked like, oh my gosh. And then she's like, let's just produce or like make it look like we're producing as much as possible for the next like 2 to 3 months. So that's what they were looking at, right? Like they're like, look, it's ramping back up, it's going high.
I got something to say about that.
Yeah.
Anomalies are scary in acquisitions. I mean, you just pointed it out. It's so obvious, but I see it every single day where it's like producing or collecting a million, 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Okay, they're going to value it on 1.5 because it just did 1.5. Be careful. Anomalies do not make sense, folks. Like, they don't.
Yeah.
High new patient volume, high collections. Pay attention. Look at production reports on a year-over-year basis. Are they doing a lot more crowns all of a sudden? Uh, Sorry, I didn't know I was getting phone calls.
No worries.
Uh, Hold on a second, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
When I got that phone, it just whacked out all my Bluetooth stuff. So let me
Ah, I can still
shut
hear
this
you,
thing.
even though you were getting the phone call.
Oh, weird. Okay, so
Yeah.
my phone took over my earphones. Anyways, so back into it, back in
Yeah.
scenes. So, like you have to look at the anomalies, otherwise you're in trouble. Bottom line. So
Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Cause that happens. I mean, I remember when we did that, I was like, hey, look, I can only do this. Why are we doing this? Cause I didn't even know why. Right. And then I'm like, nobody's the people you want me to get. We don't even take their insurance. We don't even do this. Why are we doing it? Later on, I found out it was because she was trying to sell. Right. So,
ramp up, man.
yeah.
Shame on you, Michael. Shame on you.
And if anybody wants to pay me $1 million to do it, I'll be, I'm just kidding. No, but yeah, it's interesting. So it makes me think, oh my gosh, if they do it, you know what I mean? Like people who we consider like, oh my God, they're so cool, right? Like anybody can be doing it. So I think it's really important to sit down when you find an acquisition and I don't know, man. Like, what do you think? Like, do your due diligence. What is even the due diligence that we're supposed to do? What happens, you know?
Michael, I honestly can't imagine someone doing it without a guy like me or a guy like Brian Hanks. Like I we're such a small piece of the whole pie. It's like
Mhm.
the best insurance policy ever. It's not that we know everything, but we have seen so much in our career that we can identify things. And
Mhm.
I could never educate someone on a podcast on all the things, but like to me, it's fit. I always say like hiring great professionals to help you through an acquisition probably mitigates 40% of the risk. It's a good chunk,
Mhm.
but the other 60% is the fit with you in that practice. Can you produce like that other doctor is? I mean, that's the biggest thing. I could mitigate all of these business things and point out anomalies, but if you can't replicate what they're doing, that's a big problem quickly. So that's number one. But number two, of the business and just remember, folks, like consistency is the key. Like year over year over year, you got to look back at least 3 years. And the challenge is with COVID, timestamp COVID.
Mhm.
Uh, you got to throw in the 2021, the 2020, not 2019 and 18. Now you almost have to go back to 18 to get really 3 year baseline because 2020 is almost thrown out.
Yeah.
So you go 18, 19, and 2021 are really your like core baselines. But 18 was 4 years ago. So it's not really like your linchpin of data, but it does give you a story. And I guess if you just don't feel comfortable understanding the story of the practice, you do need to get help. And I just couldn't imagine doing it without great professionals. I just going into it by yourself is I don't know how someone would do that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That scares me.
It's risky. Yeah, it's risky. Something you mentioned almost at the beginning of the episode where you said what you did as a banker, you would kind of like be at the top level. You know what I mean? You would look at it almost like at a you weren't in the trenches, right? You were like more at a bird's eye view type of thing.
Mhm.
But now you kind of implement small changes that make big picture moves, right? Like it's making big moves. I got to ask you, what are some of the biggest small changes a practice can make today to improve? What would some of those be?
Yeah, so if we're staying inside this new ownership world,
Hmm.
startups, acquisitions, I would say systems. And I know that's super like cliche as well, but the business of dentistry is a world, I said, of like 15-minute increments, right? And so
Hmm.
maximizing every opportunity, I'm not talking about being aggressive in sales. No, I'm just simply saying maximize opportunity. It's a business, dare I say, a business of widgets. I mean, fluoride,
Hmm.
recare, X-rays protocols. All of these things add up to loose change, and the tighter things are, the more successful you are. If we're in a world where you're dealing with hygienist wages getting as big as they are, you have to offset that change in the business by talking about fluoride more often, or at least being more effective in selling quote unquote fluoride, right? Just tight things up. If it's a startup, you only have 20 patients a month in the beginning, right? So knock those 20 out of the park with tight systems. Make sure 100% of those reschedule. Make sure you're doing everything right so that they accept the treatment. Follow up with the treatment if they walk out. So I'm talking about like a consultant now, but like little things is just like, don't sweat over $15 misses. I want
Mm.
you literally to sweat over the smallest uh, miss. And doing huddles, frankly, help you keep an eye out for opportunity. It's not reading the schedule. It's the team, getting the team to realize the importance of the $15 increments.
Gotcha.
I mean,
Gotcha.
this is a business of widgets. Like as a banker, I didn't see that. I just saw $1 million practice, supplies 6%, rent 7%, uh, labs 5%, 6%, profitability 35 to 45%. Like those are really big like things. But
Hmm.
when I got into practice management, I realized like the tighter things are, scheduling, systems, just maximizing every opportunity. That's the difference between someone that's really successful and someone that's just kind of making it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's easier to do as a startup, by the way, because you get to, that's a pro,
Hmm.
not a con. That's a pro. Um, you get to set up the systems day one and set the expectation with your new employees. As an acquisition, that's a con. Walking in and saying, "Yo, we're at 75% recare pre appointment. Like we need let's start tracking this stuff." And that 50-year old veteran office manager's like, "Gosh, they're a helicopter on me. Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
like
Micro.
yeah,
Yeah.
micromanager."
Yeah. Yeah.
But that there it is. That's the difference.
Hmm. Okay. I like that. So then I know there's a lot of systems, and you said to have systems, but what's one like that maybe next level consultants teach, one that like you can just gift to our listeners where you're like, guys, do this system, follow it like this. Here's the instructions. You will see some improvement in whatever that is, right? Within the next week.
Ooh, there's so many systems in a dental office. Which one do I use for this podcast interview right now? like, um, I'm trying to let me say, okay, treatment presentation. I'm totally out of my depth, and this is probably more my partner's forte, but I'm going to give it a go.
Mhm.
Paula's my partner at Next Level. She's been in dentistry for over 30 some 5 years, whatever. She owns a practice in Phoenix. She's a hygienist. Okay, so we're big into treatment presentation. And
Mhm.
as a startup and as an acquisition, it's super important that you communicate super effectively, right? And every opportunity matters. And so whether you saw very few patients today or if you saw a lot, you need to nail the whole process of delivering treatment. from start to finish, right? And
Mhm.
I would really get granular on that process. And the doctor and the team, you all need to figure out what's most important to the patient. Because without understanding what's most important, you're not going to be able to tap into how they're going to make emotional decisions. I mean, our brains, our emotional decision making is way more powerful than the practical. That's why listen to Simon Sinek and some of these great thought leaders about making decisions with your gut, and it's find your why and delivering the why so people can buy into the why. So, anyways, I'm going to get crazy here. So let's just bring it back to this small systems. But
Yeah.
like, if you can train your team on asking great questions to patients, listening, and then delivering their treatment in their own words and their own importance, if you could just master that, you're going to win, period. And backing each other up, the handoffs are key in that process as well. Because if one of your teammates is doing it but not all of them are doing it, there's a miss there. The front office person doesn't back you up in the back, or vice versa. The front office person gets it, and doctor's kind of a robot with how they do it, and you're relying on your front person to sell it like that. No, it doesn't work. The whole team really needs to gel in that delivery. um that's the difference between a quick start and with an acquisition to maintaining patients. They really, they in an acquisition, they really feel like you care and they're being listened to. So just that whole process, and deep diving into the handoffs and just what that looks like, and the visuals versus the audio messaging, right? So just that whole process, I think both sides could benefit from. And also, just again, following up with treatment and hygiene. I mean, that's the other one is, okay, so you knock it out of the park with the delivery, but too many times practices don't follow up with treatment, and there's plenty of statistics about once they walk out, they're 50% less likely to come back in, and you're going
Mhm.
to see them in 6 months on their next hygiene. So follow up with treatment, guys. I mean, it's really important to do that.
Yeah, man, I love those systems. I especially love how you said, like, we really, for the treatment planning, have to ask questions. Guys, you can make a living off of asking great questions. And that's what we're doing here at the pod. We're asking questions for, but you really want to ask really good questions, right? Listening and hearing the person out and validating. So awesome. Mike, if I know you just started a new season, right? We're talking about acquisition. So you started a new season on the podcast, right?
Yeah, so it's called. We put dental in it, but it's Dental Acquisitions Uncensored, season 2. So Google that, or Spotify that, or whatever you use. Dental Acquisitions Uncensored. That's season 2. Season 1 was Startup Uncensored, 3 words. And obviously, the first season was all about the startup from start to finish. And the season 2, we're really excited about it because we're going to go through step 1 all the way through of an acquisition. I think there's like 20 some episodes, and it's very intentional. There's a lot of podcasts out there that do great interviews and array of lots of different things. But my vision for my podcast was very step for step. So that's what I love about it.
Yeah. Our listeners love step-by-step instructions, meat and potatoes. Like that's what I want. You know what I mean? That's what we all love. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that, man. And Mike, if anybody has further questions or concerns, or they want to reach out to you, they want to pick your brain more, or anything like that, where can they find you?
Just call me. Literally, I'm gonna give my cell phone, 720-309-9551. Call me. Go to my website. You could put it probably below. Click on that. Check that out. We love what we do. I'm sure you could figure that out, Michael. You were on my show. Now I'm on your show. Just love what we do. It's fun, and we're passionate about it. So that's however we can help or not help, but at least guiding in the right direction, whether we're a part of it or not.
Yeah. Awesome. So guys, that's all going to be in the show notes below. Definitely check out the website. give, text Mike at 3 a.m. in the morning, be like, hey man, just wanted to see what's up. What are you doing? Bug him with
Yeah.
questions, and he'll love it. So Mike, thank you so much for being with us. It was a pleasure, and we'll hear from you soon.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Appreciate the time.